you won't be disturbed by it. You will 5:25 or even, so you have some time left.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are joining us from around the world. I was happy to receive your invitation and will speak to this audience, particularly given the fact that you have been running this institution, this organization, for over 100 years now. And that is quite something. Usually it's very difficult to do something like that with people coming together. For something to last harmoniously, it's important that people give up thinking about themselves and start thinking about others. In any institution or organization, if you investigate why, what are the causes for their successes and their failures, in any, whether that's family or at the workplace, wherever, could be the village, could be the whole country, a nation even. You know, the old together we stand strong, but once we are divided, we fall. So the fact that you've been doing this for the last 100 years and more is really evidence, good evidence that there is something that has kept you bound together. And I believe that is your motive and your motive to serve the Buddha Sasana. And I think your name says it all. Servants of the Buddha, what a wonderful name that is. This is referred to as Buddha Dasa. In Sinhalese, we call it Buddha Dasa. My Guru Swami Mahanse always instructs us, all our monks at the monastery, all 120 of us, to be Buddha Dasas. We are in the service of the Buddha Sasana. Of course, there are things that we are able to do as monks, but I'm very proud and pleased to see that as a community, you have all come together and you are doing what you can in your lay lives to serve the Buddha Sasana, and to whatever you serve towards the Buddha Sasana is a service that you do unto yourselves on the path to Nibbana. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, so you must forgive me if I have to clear my throat from time to time. It might sound a little bit loud, so but if I keep switching off the microphone every time I do that, then it will disrupt the flow. So please forgive me if when I clear in my throat it becomes a little bit too loud for you. Happiness. It's almost a riddle, isn't it? It's one of those things that everybody wants, but nobody seems to have. But wherever you look around, people seem to be doing lots of things for happiness. Now, on the way to Colombo today, we were driven from the outskirts of the monastery, and as we moved closer and closer to Colombo, I was looking outside the window and I realized how many things people have built and comforts that people have surrounded themselves in for the sake of happiness. So as we were driving towards this location, there were the supermarkets and the flower boutiques and the what do you call them? Fashion stores and all sorts, eateries, right? All sorts of places, entertainment places and the pubs and clubs and you name it. So then I began to wonder, in Colombo and in the cities, not just in Sri Lanka, but in many cities, people have access to a lot of these amenities and a lot of these facilities, right? That is why it is considered. So people like to come and live around Colombo, and that's why it's expensive as well, because you have easy access to some of the things that people don't necessarily do as you move to the suburbs. So where we have the monastery in Ingiriya is about 1.5 hours drive from here. Not so much, right? You have rubber plantations, and much of it is just still greenery. But you don't have the supermarkets, not the big supermarkets. You don't have the big boutiques. You don't have the big shopping malls. You don't have many of those things. Now, I myself enjoyed this lifestyle when I was a layperson. So, whenever I drive into Colombo, every time I do that, I'm reminded of my time in London. And I think Colombo is now not very far from becoming a city in London, if not London City. And it's good because people need access to those things, and so be it. It's not my place to criticize that. But what I feel is that it seems that people are missing the point. If happiness is available in what you see, what you taste, what you smell, what you wear, and what you experience, then that's fine. But unfortunately, as you begin to contemplate on the Dhamma, you begin to realize that people have misunderstood, or that people have, I suppose, missed the plot. It would be true to say that we have all come into this world looking for happiness. Now, if you take each of your lives as an example, you all come from various walks of life, and you all come from different professions. You have different tastes. Although you have come here together as a community, you have different tastes in life, and that's perfectly fine. That's what makes us unique, right? We have our own personalities, we have our different preferences, likes and dislikes, and so on. But if I were to ask you why it is that you like the things you do and dislike the things you do, you all have the same answer. And that answer is because this is what makes me happy. Yeah, let's take a simple example so it can make sense to everyone. Now, of course, I can't see the facial reactions of our online listeners, but I would like you all to engage with me as much as you possibly can. So when I ask these questions, do try and come up with your own answers so it becomes interactive. Of course, you may not be able to speak to me, but I mean to speak to you nonetheless. Take a simple example. What is your favorite food? Can I take a few answers from the audience? Sir, what's your favorite food? Mangoes. Thank you very much. I'll try someone else. Madam, you said? Chinese cuisine. Yes, okay. Madam? Chocolate. All right. Madam, you said? Sorry? Rice and curry. Sir? Fried rice. Okay. So we've got a few examples, right? Now, if I ask you now, why is it that it is your favorite food? You'll tell me that because it tastes good and it makes you feel happy. When you eat it, it makes you feel good. Yes, of course, it is nourishing. You'll have those reasons as well. It's good for your health. It's good for your body, right? It's detoxing. You'll have all these reasons to give as well. But at the same time, you will say, I like it because it tastes good. I enjoy it, and so on. Now, I'll take one example. I'll pick one. So the gentleman here, the phone said mangoes. Okay? So that being your favorite food, sir, you like it because it tastes good. Would you be okay if we force you to eat mangoes and nothing else for the rest of your life? No, of course we wouldn't. In fact, you'd say, Swaminathan, so what a silly question that is. But then you eat mangoes because you tell me that mangoes make you feel good. It makes you feel happy. Yeah, it delights you. So if something makes you happy, then more of it should make you what? More happy, happier. Yeah? And even more of it should make you even happier. But what is the reality of it? After you start eating something for a few bites of it, a few times, then you get fed up of it, right? In fact, you get sick of it. And there comes a point where you say, show me another mango and I'm going to throw it, right? I'm going to throw it at your face. So don't throw me any more mangoes again. That's it. Enough of mangoes. Right now, just think about your domestic lives at home. You look for variety. Like if you have string hoppers and curry today, you can't have it tomorrow. You want something else, right? You want rice and curry today, then biryani tomorrow, and then noodles the following day, and you like some variety. In fact, we say that variety is the spice of life. So, but then when I ask you what is your favorite item of food, you have an answer. But unfortunately, when we apply the scientific test, so here's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to forward to you or propose to you that happiness is a science. Although you might now be thinking that happiness is an art. That is why it's so different for everyone. Right? Because when you ask someone what is your favorite piece of art, what is your favorite piece of music, people have different answers because it's not scientific, right? It's art. But then if I ask you what makes you happy, again people feel that it's an art, it's not a science. This is because people haven't understood the science of happiness. What I'd like to do today, in the course of the time that we have available to us, try and propose to you that actually happiness is a science. What's good about that? If happiness is a science, what's so good about it? Then we can replicate it, we can reproduce it, right? We can keep on doing it. Whereas if we don't understand the science behind something, then we're in trouble because we don't know how to get it back again. So when we eat mangoes, the first bite always tastes better than the second bite. And the second bite is better than the third bite. And the third bite is always better than the fourth bite. So by the time you get to, say, a bag full of mangoes, that's it. You don't want any more mangoes. But of course, after a while, maybe a few days, maybe a few weeks, maybe another month or so, again, you like your mangoes. This is the same for all of the examples that you gave, even if it was chocolates now. Right? So the same chocolate, you'll eat it once, you'll eat it twice, you'll eat it 3 times, but then after you've had a bar of chocolate, there'll come a point where you say, no more chocolate, please. You get sick of it. So if happiness is in the chocolate, if happiness is in the mango, if happiness is in Chinese food, if happiness is in rice and curry, then how is it that more of it makes you feel sick? Logic dictates that more of it should make you feel happier, right? But it doesn't work out to be. It's not like that. So then we need to figure out why that is so. So I want to try and explain to you then how happiness works in the mind. Now, happiness is a mental phenomenon. If we can master this mental phenomenon, then we regain control of our own happiness. Right now, you are not in control of your happiness. I can make that bold claim because there are times in life when you are not happy. And there are times in life when you try to be happy, but despite every effort you make, it's just not working out. And there are people sometimes around you, things that are happening around you, events, situations that are surrounding you, which seem to steal your happiness. It seems to take away your happiness, drain you of your happiness, and then you're left unhappy. And in those times, you feel so distressed. Sometimes people even go and commit suicide because they don't know how to be happy. Some people, they go and take drugs because they feel drugs will either make me happy or they'll make me forget about what's going on with my life. While I'm stoned, I forget what's going on. And when I wake up again, I'll still have the problem, but then I take drugs again. So, that becomes an addiction. This is all because people haven't yet figured what real happiness is. That is why I believe the Buddha's quest in coming into this world was to guide us to happiness. And what I want to try and do, ladies and gentlemen, is to share with you the Buddha's guide to happiness. How did the Buddha teach us to be happy? Etam santam etam panit. This is wonderful. This is beautiful. He speaks of happiness. Yadidan sabba sankara samukha, sabbupadi pati nissaggo, anhatte, virago, nirodho, nibbana. Each of these words actually embodies nibbana. Each of these words. But I'm going to take one of them. That will be sufficient for our discussion today. Tanhakkaya. Tanhakkaya is a cessation of attachment. Tanha is attachment, and the cessation of attachment is santam panita. Etam santam, etam panita. Tanhakkaya nibbananti. So I've skipped some of the middle parts, right? I've just left you with tanhakkaya. Cessation of attachment is bliss. How so? Is a question that we must ask. Right now, as a gentleman, when he introduced me to the audience, said, in life, we believe that gathering and accumulating and hoarding things brings us happiness, but is it really in collecting all these things, or is it in letting go? How do we actually achieve happiness? I believe the answer is neither. Letting go is not the path to happiness. In fact, if you see, there are people who try and let go things forcefully, and then they are left crying and weeping about it. Say, for instance, if there is something that you like, and then you have to let go of it, it still makes you unhappy. Now, sometimes, there are, we've seen at ordination ceremonies at the monastery, mothers and fathers, of course, they dote on their children, right? As much as they love to give their children a chance to enter the sasana and fulfill their noble path, every ordination ceremony, you have mothers and fathers who cry their eyes out because they have this grief of letting go of their children, and it's very natural. So after a while, they of course they come to terms with it, and of course they understand that they're doing it for their children, so they do that. But you see, in those moments, they're letting go of something that they're still attached to. The path to real happiness, ladies and gentlemen, is to realize, not to let go, is to realize. So what's the difference between realizing and letting go? These are very different things. Realization is one, letting go is another. Once you realize, there is nothing to let go. Let me explain this to you with an example. Let's say, take yourselves back to your younger years, when you were younger. You would have played with dolls, toy cars, and so on, right? If you remember your childhood years, you would have played with your toys, yeah? Do you remember when you were younger, say your parents or your adults, your brother, maybe your siblings would come and take your toys from you, or take your play dolls from you when you still want to play with them? That really bothered you. It disturbed you, and it made you annoyed. It angered you, and you started crying about it. But nowadays, you don't want your toys, do you? You don't still play with your dolls. So what happened? How come you let go of your dolls? Why don't you still play with your dolls? Because you have realized that dolls are just playthings. It was your realization that was the answer to that problem. When you were younger, remember you used to play Pitu, right? And then we had a playhouse, and we used to play with playthings and play tea sets and play saucers and cutlery and so on, right? And toy cars and so on. If you have children still who are of that age, and they still play with their toys and so on, if you try to take something from a child that they are still attached to, of course you're going to make the child cry. Now, relate a little story. something that happened to me when I was in my lay life. This was many years ago, but it will really help you to make sense of what I'm sharing. So this was a while, this was about 10 years ago when this happened. So my wife and I, we visited Sri Lanka for a short holiday. And then we wanted to go and see a friend of hers. Now this friend, she had a 3-year-old boy. And this is the first time we were going to see the boy. So we thought we should, of course, take something nice to as a gift for this child. And as friends do, you do that. It's a nice thing to do. So before we went to the place, then we went to the supermarket to buy something. So we actually went to a toy shop. And because this is a boy, we bought the boy a toy car. And who would have thought, right? Of course, every child likes, most boys, they like toy cars. So it's the obvious choice when you buy a toy. We bought a toy car. We wrapped it up. And then we went to her friend's place. And so there's a little kid playing around. And so we asked the kid to come over, and we gave this boy the car. So this is all nicely wrapped in wrapping paper, in its own gift box. So what the kid does now, as you can expect, he opens the wrapping paper, right? And he retrieves the box, which has the car in it. So what are we expecting the boy to do now? Open the box, take the car, and play with it, right? You'd be surprised what the kid actually did. So this little child, he tears open the wrapping paper, and there was a bit of sellotape that was used to stick this wrapping paper around the box. Nothing interested him more than that bit of sellotape. So he took this bit of sellotape. I think he just discovered cohesion for the first time. He just discovered sticky tape for the first time, because he'd not come across that before. And now he was so impressed by the fact that, there was this new thing that he discovered, that when he put on his fingers, it stuck. So he could stick his 2 fingers together with this bit of sellotape. Now we'd spent a lot of money on buying this kid a toy, and maybe, 10 rupees or so buying the wrapping paper to wrap the toy up, and this child is more impressed by the sticky tape than he is by the toy car that was about a few thousand rupees. So my wife and I, we were looking at each other, and we were wondering, why did we spend so much on buying this kid a toy? We could have just bought him a roll of sticky tape. So of course, now the mother of the child, reading the situation and realizing that we were obviously very upset by what we'd seen. Now, of course, she wants to now restore sanity. So what she does is she runs to the child and says, Pita, please, play with the toy. See what auntie and uncle have bought for you, and play with the toy. Right? So she tries to take the toy and put it in the child's hand. And what she tried to do was take the tape out of the child's hand. As she did, what do you think happened? The child wasn't having any of it. He did not want the toy. All he wanted was that bit of sticky tape. 2 inches of it, that was it. He was not interested in the toy at all. See, what we thought was precious, what we thought was valuable, was not valuable to the child. He was not willing to let go. So when the mother tried to take the sticky tape out of the child's hand, the child began to cry. Now the mother was not happy about this either, because she wanted us to be happy, right? We were her guests, and she wanted us to be happy, and she thought we'd only be happy when the child starts to play with the toy, as you'd expect. So she was trying her level best to try to get the child to play with the toy, but that wasn't happening either. So we were trying to convince the mother, it's okay, let him be, but of course, she was trying to make us happy, and we were trying to make the child happy. So it was like a battlefield there. So in the end, we said, it's, what, just let's leave it. Let's just start talking. We'll just talk about whatever we have to talk about. Let's let the child be and do what the child does. And then we let the toy car to a side and let the child to play with with the sticky tape. So then we just had our own conversation. A few minutes later, the child picked up the toy car. By this point, he'd had enough with the sticky tape. And now he wanted to play with the car. So then the mother went and took the sticky tape, and the child didn't bat an eyelid. What do you think would have happened if the mother now tried to take the car? The same reaction as before. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, it's very difficult to let go until you realize. When the child wanted the bit of tape, he thought that that was what was going to make him happy. So therefore, he wanted nothing more than the bit of tape. He just wanted to play with that. The toy didn't interest him one bit. But once he had gotten enough of that, once he'd gotten fed up of it, and I'll explain to you how that happens in just a moment, because I have left you the question with how come you have mangoes and then you get fed up of it. I'll come back to that in just a moment. But once the child had gotten fed up of the tape, now he wanted to play with the car. So at that point, he was interested in the car, and now he starts playing with the car. If we had tried to take the car out of the child's hand at that point, then again, he would have thrown a hissy fit. When the child realizes that what is of value is not the tape but the car, at that point, that which has no value, he lets go. That which has value, he attaches to. This is the same for each and every one of us. When we were younger, we used to play with toys, dolls, toy cars, and whatnot, right? The reason that we used to enjoy these things and enjoy playing with these things, ladies and gentlemen, is because we thought that they had some intrinsic value in them. As we grow up, we realize that, through education, through association with others, and, through indoctrinations that we receive, by reading the newspapers, learning at school, on the internet, reading magazines and books, and watching the news and so on, all of these sources of information, they leave an imprint on our mind. We are influenced by all the messages that we receive day to day. The information that we receive on a daily basis, they change our value set. What we think is valuable today is not necessarily what we believe is valuable tomorrow. So whatever we believe is valuable, that we cannot let go. In fact, if someone was to take it away from us, that would hurt us no end. So when something that is of no value to us is taken away from us, that doesn't hurt us at all. I'll give you another example that you might be able to better relate. Let's just say, take a mother who's delivered a child, and let's say at the hospital, her child got swapped with another child. Okay, this is obviously unplanned mistake, but she doesn't realize this. So she comes home, not with her biological child, but someone else's child. The two children are born on the same day. They look very similar, right? So the mother cannot tell the difference. Now, when something happens to this child, something bad happens to this child, the mother is going to feel for it. Right? The mother is going to feel sad. The mother is going to feel terrible when something bad happens to this child. But what happens if something happens to her real child? It doesn't hurt her. Let's say that child is now the neighbor. Right? So two neighbors, they both become pregnant. They went to the hospital. They delivered the children, but the two children got swapped at the maternity ward, right? And then now they've come back home. This mother has come home with the child of the other mother, and that mother has come home with the child of this mother, right? So really, now the children have been swapped, okay? So the mother should really feel sad or happy when something happens to her child, right? That logic would say so. But in this case, it's not this mother's own child that makes this mother happy or sad. It's actually the other child. That's because the mother believes that this is my child. So the child that the mother has in her possession, she believes is her child. Next door neighbor, the neighbor believes that that is her child. So the two mothers suffer not on behalf of their own children, but they suffer on behalf of another child. This is all possible because, after all, it boils down to what you believe is yours. The truth is, there is nothing in this world that is yours. All there are things that you believe is yours. Do you agree with me? Don't just nod. I want you to take a moment to reflect on that. Because if you agree with me, then there is nothing in this world that you can't let go. If you really agree with me, right? If so, then I'll be asking you to let go of a few things. And you can come back with me to the monastery. But of course, there are things that you can't let go so easily because you still believe that they're yours. Your house, whose is your house? It's yours, isn't it? Is it yours or do you believe it is yours? You think it's yours. In fact, when you look at your house, you can't help but think it's yours. When you walk up to your car, don't you feel that it's your car? Don't you actually feel that it's your car? In fact, if someone comes and bumps into it, it hurts you, doesn't it? But if you see someone bumping into someone else's car, does it hurt as much? It doesn't. So why does one hurt you more than the other? Because you believe that the car, your car is your car. It's not really. You just believe it's yours. It's not really yours. How can we convince ourselves that things are not really yours? And it's only an imaginary notion. How do we convince ourselves of this? I think if we take a few examples, it will come clear. Let's take an example. You go shopping, okay? You want to buy a loaf of bread. You go to the shop. How much is a loaf of bread these days? I can't remember the last time I bought one, so I don't know. How much is a loaf of bread these days? 200? How much, sir? 290. That much? Good heavens. Okay. When I used to go shopping, it was about 50 rupees. But that was about 20 years ago. So 290 rupees. Okay, say 300 rupees for a loaf of bread. A good loaf of, decent loaf of bread. So you go to the shop, and the shopkeeper standing by the store, he asks you, what do you want? You say, I have 300 rupees in my hand. This money belongs to me. I would like to buy some bread. That bread belongs to you. Please, can I have your bread in exchange for my money? Of course, you don't say it like that, but that's the unsaid, isn't it? My money for your bread. Yeah? Now, the shopkeeper says, okay, put your money on the table, and I will put the bread on the table. And if I'm happy with the price that you put on the table, I'll keep the money, you take the bread, and we part our own ways. So this is the transaction that's taken place there. See, a loaf of bread is not really 300 rupees. It's not really. But then why do you pay 300 rupees? Here's why. 300 rupees is what the shopkeeper needs to stop thinking that the loaf of bread belongs to him. I'll say that again. If you actually get the gist of this, you'll realize what a funny world we live in. 300 rupees is what the shopkeeper needs to stop thinking that the loaf of bread belongs to him. Because if you pay him only 250, when you should actually be paying him 300, he's not going to be happy with that. He's not going to give up the idea that the bread belongs to him. The bread doesn't really belong to him. He thinks it belongs to him. So you can convince him that it doesn't if you give him 300 bucks. So give him 300 rupees and he's happy to convince himself that the bread doesn't belong to him. But then that 300, you have to be convinced that it doesn't belong to you. At that point, the two swap goods. So you give the money, he gives the bread, and you walk, you depart, you part your own ways. If the value of something is actually in the product itself, we would never be able to do business. Business would not be able to happen. We wouldn't be able to transact if value was an intrinsic part of an object. The very reason that we can do business, we can do transactions, make transactions, is because all of these values are all in the mind. They are notions, they are mental fabrications, they are mental notions. None of these values are actually part of the product. That's why you can do business. So how come then, going back to the mangoes, how is it that we get fed up of using the same thing over and over and over again? Now, even if it's a bar of soap, right? The first time you use it, it smells so nice. After a while, you just get so used to it and it doesn't smell the same, right? That's why you look for different fragrance, you look for different color, you look for different anything, really. This is because, ladies and gentlemen, we haven't still grasped how happiness works. And that's what I'm going to try and explain to you now. So there's a connection between value, happiness, and how the Buddha helps us understand all this and pieces this together. I'm going to ask you to do a physical activity. Don't worry, it's not too taxing. You can do it all while you remain seated to help you get this point across. What I want you to do is to hold your right arm up. Like you just hold your right hand up. You can follow as I do it. Just like that. And now, with your left hand, bend all the other fingers except one finger. So maybe your index finger. Right? Just keep your index finger up, and you can bend all the other fingers. Now, with the other hand, I want you to twist this finger backwards. Bend it backwards as much as you can, as far back as you can. Now, at some point, it's going to start to hurt. Yeah? If it hurts, then you're doing it fine. You're doing it right. Bend it as far back as you possibly can and hold it for a little while. Go as far back as you can. While it hurts, it's okay, because I need it to hurt for you to understand what I'm about to explain to you in just a moment. Okay? So it's going to hurt now. Is it hurting all of you? Good. You didn't expect a Swami Master to come and say, when it's hurting, it's good, right? Right. So if it's hurting you now, I want you to let go. Right. When you let go, didn't you feel a sense of relief in that moment? This is what we call pleasure. Pleasure is a funny little phenomenon. See, the only way to experience that pleasure is to first inflict pain. Without the pain, there is no pleasure. This is why, without bending that finger, you don't experience that pleasure. To experience that same pleasure again, you have to bend the finger back again. And as you let go, you're going to feel that pleasure again. I'll give you another example. When it's a hot day, what do you normally try and do? Say you're out shopping on a hot day, you get back home, what do you want to do? Get yourself a drink of water? What sort of water do you want at that time? A nice hot glass of water? A nice cool glass of water, maybe an ice cold glass of water, right? You like a soft drink, a cool drink. Why is that? Because it makes you feel good. Yeah? So on a hot day, a cool glass of water makes you feel good. What about on a cold day? So like maybe a rainy day like today. Would you offer someone a cool glass of water? No, chances are you'll offer them a warm glass of water. See, a cool glass of water makes you feel good on a hot day. A warm glass of water makes you feel good on a cold day. Don't you see that there's a fundamental connection between the two? Pleasure is always gained when there's a relief from pain. No pain, no gain. You've heard that before, haven't you? It's always like that. When you have a headache, you take some paracetamol or a disprin or something. Yeah. And then once the paracetamol takes its effect and your headache is cured, how do you feel? You feel good. If you want to feel that good again, what must you do? If you want to feel that good again, what must you do? The obvious, of course. You need the headache back again, don't you? Yes. Now, when you go out shopping, okay, you carry your heavy bags with you when you go shopping, and you come back home and you put it on the ground at home or on your kitchen worktop, and you relax. You take a deep sigh of relief, and you go. That's so relaxing, so soothing. That's because you've just experienced pain. You've been carrying those bags all day long, and that's why letting go of them feels so good. See, so therefore, whenever you experience pleasure in life, ladies and gentlemen, there's always a pain beforehand. Do take a moment to try and see whether you agree with me on that point or not. Every time you experience pleasure, there's always a pain beforehand. You have to relieve yourself from that pain for there to be pleasure. Where there is no pain, there is no pleasure. So if you need more pleasure, what must you do? You need more pain. Now, when you're walking out in the hot sun, right? Say on a hot day, you have to go out shopping or maybe go to the bank, run some errands, whatever. And when you come back, into your car and it's nicely air conditioned, right? You get back into your car, how do you feel? You feel good, right? But that feeling of goodness does not last very long. You feel good because it was hot outside. For a brief moment, you feel a sense of relief. And that relief you experience as pleasure. So then to experience that pleasure again, what must you do? You're going to step outside in the heat again. So this is the fallacy of pleasure. Now the Buddha comes into this world to open our eyes and show us that happiness and pleasure are two very different things. The ice cream parlor outside, they don't sell you happiness. They sell you pleasure. How do they do that? If it's a hot day, they can relieve you from that pain. Or first they can vex you and make you want ice cream. If they can make you want ice cream, now in your mind, you are looking for ice cream. As you're looking for ice cream, you are yearning for ice cream, right? And then once you get your ice cream, you are relieved from that vexation. Once you get something you want, you are relieved from that waiting. And that is what makes you feel happy. Take another example. So I'm giving you lots of examples so that you can actually start to make sense of this. I think we've got a few more minutes. I can give you one more example, and then we can go to take any questions that you might have. Say, family, a mother has two children. They are twins. Okay? I don't know if any of you have twins. A mother has twins. Now, these two children, one is quite studious, the other is not. Okay? So one child is very studious, the other is not. So the studious one, he always comes first, second, or third in class. Yeah, as expected. The other child, he's not so well performing in his academics. He might be good in other things, but not in his studies. So he's usually, in the middle of the class. Maybe he's 15, around that region. So at the last exams, the children came home and then they give the mother their exam results. And the child who's very good in their studies, they tell the mother, Mom, I've come third in class. Okay? So they've come third in class. The other child says, Mom, I've come 15th in class. So that was their grade from the last exams. So this was 6 months ago. Now this time around, 6 months later, another set of exams, and the two children come home. And here's what they have to say. The studious child says, Mom, I'm second in class. So haven't they improved? They've improved by 1 rank, haven't they? They were third initially, and now they've come second. The other child, who was 15th in class, he comes and says, Mom, I'm fourth in class. Which one makes you happy? If you were the mother, which child has just made you happier? How come? The second child is fourth in class. The other child is second in class. Surely that child should have made you happier. Why is it that the other child makes you happier? Exactly. The reason for that, ladies and gentlemen, is because you suffer more because of the second child. What hurts you more pleases you more. So more pain, more pleasure. Whereas the first child, who was the studious one, they were always high performing. So therefore, them coming second in class, that is to be expected. It's nothing, nothing to write home about. But when the second child, who is normally not so well performing in school, they come home and say, I'm fourth in class. You give them a hug, you throw a party, and the other child is wondering, hang on a second, I'm second in class. How come the other guy gets all the treatment? How come he gets the royal treatment and I just get a pat on the back? So you can expect that the children to be very unsettled by your behavior towards them. But the point of the matter is, do you recognize, ladies and gentlemen, that happiness always comes when there is pain that is relieved? Now, I'll give you one last example before we wrap up for the day. When you walked into this room, you sat yourselves down in what you thought was the most comfortable posture. You sat yourselves down in the most comfortable posture. If we continue this talk for another 1 or 2 hours, there'll come a point where you're going to shift your posture and make yourself a little bit more comfortable. Yeah? As you adjust yourself, momentarily you will feel a lot of pleasure. You want to do that now? Just try it out. Just adjust yourself a little bit. Yes, exactly. See, in that moment, you experience a sense of pleasure because there's a bit of pain that's building up in your muscles. There's a bit of tension that's building up in your muscles, and you're now being relieved from that. But although this posture that you're in now makes you feel comfortable, if I asked you to remain in this posture for the next 2 hours, that would be torture. So then, is there such a posture that you can claim to be the most comfortable posture? Is there such a posture? There isn't. Whatever is comfortable is always what helps you to relieve yourself from pain. So time and time again, this is the answer. Now, finally, coming back to the example that we discussed. So you have your favorite items of food. Why is it that eating the same thing over and over and over again makes you get fed up of it? This is because absence makes the heart grow fond. When you are distant from something you like, you will have this experience if particularly you have had to say goodbye to a loved one, maybe one of your children, or maybe a relation, maybe your husband or your wife, someone in the family, say they've had to travel somewhere for a while. At the airport, you bid them goodbye, and then once they come back, you go and hug them and you embrace them and you give them the royal treatment, but for how long? Say if your beloved husband, he goes away on a business trip for 3 years. Right? Once he comes back, you give him the full bells and whistles, right? But for how long? On the first day, you cook for him, you wash his clothes, and you feed him if you can. Right? You do everything for him. But the second day, third day, by the fourth day, by the end of the week, you're probably like, honey, if you're going to make a cup of tea, can you make one for me as well? But the first day, it's not like that. On the first day, you give the royal treatment, but as time passes by, you default back to just the average standard treatment. That's because absence makes the heart grow fonder. So even if your favorite item of food, you think tastes so delicious, it only tastes so good because you don't have it all the time. As you distance yourself from something, as you pace yourself out, things become more pleasurable. But as you start to take something over and over again, as you start to consume something, whether that is a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, or a touch, it doesn't matter. As you start to become familiar with something, the novelty wears off. You've heard the saying in Sinhalese, Amadassana. You've heard that, right? Yeah. So what that means is contempt, familiarity breeds contempt. And the reason for that is, as you become familiar with something, the novelty wears off, and your longing for it starts to wear off. So therefore, as you are kept waiting for something, your mind begins to suffer. Your mind begins to yearn for it. It longs for it. And that longing is hurtful. That longing is painful. So when you present the object of its wanting, at some point, that wanting has now been addressed, and therefore the mind is relieved from that vexation. This is why even the things that you really like, as you use them over and over and over again, you lose the fondness that you have towards them. And you wonder why it is that two people who date each other and they go out with each other, sometimes for years on, and then they get married, and then 2 weeks later, I don't have to spell it out, do you do it? Sometimes a few months later, they go their own way. Because you see, when they're still dating, they don't get to see each other every day, do they? If you only saw your girlfriend at the tuition class, at chemistry class, you only saw her once a week. So the rest of the week, you're waiting to see her. That waiting makes your heart yearn for her. That's the vexation that builds up in the heart, in the mind, I mean. And that vexation is relieved when you see her, but that only happens once a week. But then once you bring her home, and she's now with you, then what happens? Every time you want to see her, she's there. Even when you don't want to see her, she's still there. So therefore, the mind is not kept waiting for it. And when the mind is not kept waiting for it, there is no pleasure that is to be experienced. Because for there to be pleasure, there must be pain. So the Buddha's guide to happiness then is to realize this truth. Once you realize that happiness is not an intrinsic characteristic of any object, it's not something that you can get from an experience. It's not something that you can get from a person. It's not something that you can get from an object of any sort. Now you give up your expectation of happiness from those objects. You give up your expectation of those objects to please you. At that point, you are free from vexation. You're free from longing. You're free from waiting. You're free from yearning. That is true bliss. That is the Buddha's guide to happiness. This is why I say happiness and pleasure are worlds apart. So freedom from vexation gives you pleasure, but once you're able to free your mind from attachment, that brings you happiness. It wouldn't be right to refer to both of them as the same thing. That's why the Buddha refers to this in the Pali as the Amisa Sukha and the Niramisa Sukha. The Niramisa Sukha is a sukha that has no attachment to anything. Okay, so I think I should probably conclude there and open for any questions that people might have.
If you reverse translate about use to job, and then given so much of people, physically, a lot of energy, never mind, unique problem, regular, seriousness, now and then, trying to find more, but happiness, something very different than that, more. I feel a lot of concern, and can take it from this family. Any questions from the Zoom audience? Please raise your hands. And unmute. This is Manoj, you have muted this. Not muted from the audience. Zoom audience. Zoom audience. No, for them to ask questions. Yeah, they can. So we have to unmute. Only on chat. Okay. If you have any questions, please put it on the chat box. And we'll take it up with the mic. In the meantime, anyone of you all who wants to answer the questions or any clarifications? No questions. There's one question where the session we recorded, yes. So there's always this echoing. So any questions? Nothing. Shane, do you like to ask a question?
I'll try and answer that question. So there's a question, is this same as conditioning due to craving and clinging and understanding impermanence or changing? All things are conditioned, and so is craving. The Buddha's teaching is such that there is nothing in this world that is not conditioned, except for one, that is Nibbana. That is the only asankata. All other things are sankata, meaning they're all conditioned, including suffering, including attachment, including vexation, including pleasure, including relief from vexation. There's only one thing that is unconditioned, and that is happiness. So as I have tried to explain to you today, ladies and gentlemen, the distinction between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure is to be found in relief from vexation. I hope it's clear to you what I mean by vexation. This is the yearning, the wanting in the mind. It builds up over time. Yeah, that's when you're waiting for something. It's like when Christmas Eve, you're waiting for your presents on Christmas Day, but it's Christmas Eve, so you just get waiting for it. What about if every day was Christmas Eve? Would you like that? So Christmas presents are always the following day. It's never today. That would be a punishment, wouldn't it? Although people say that, what do you call it? Hope keeps what's the saying? I can't remember off the top of my head. Hope keeps you alive? Yes. Yeah, so it's hope that keeps you going on and on and on, right? It's like the carrot in front of the donkey. Yeah. The donkey is always hopeful that it can have the carrot. So that keeps the donkey moving forward. But the donkey never gets the carrot. But that's what keeps the donkey moving forwards. So in the same manner, us human beings we are always hopeful about a pleasure that will come to us eventually, tomorrow. And therefore, we are always striving for that promise of pleasure tomorrow. But that pleasure never comes. But the promise is enough to keep us going forward. So the question is this conditioned? Yes, all of this is conditioned, and that's the best that's the best news that we can all have, because only if something is conditioned can something be seized. The reason that we can put out a fire is because we know that a fire is conditioned. If we couldn't figure out what the conditions are that bring about the fire, there wouldn't be a way that we could put it out, could we? So, clinging and craving, these are all conditioned phenomena, and understanding of the Dhamma helps us to work out the causes that bring these conditions, and therefore to cease them, and therefore free the mind from clinging and attachment. There's another question. So, how do we come to the realization of the futility of relying on things for happiness? That's a great question. It's coming from a doctrine. The answer to that is through the understanding of the Dhamma. The Buddha comes into this world to teach us three aspects of nature. Nahi silena vatan hotu uppajjanti natagata attakara tinipada sambuddhena akasita. The Buddha does not come into this world to teach us about the precepts or rites, rituals, and so on. That is not his purpose of coming into this world. His entire purpose of coming into this world is to teach us about anicca, dukkha, and anatta. Anicca, dukkha, and anatta are what we need to understand to come to realization of the world around us, so that we realize that happiness is not to be gained from the things outside of us, but happiness is all within the mind itself. And how do you understand this? By continuously reflecting on the Dhamma. So you have to listen to the Dhamma, you have to reflect on the Dhamma, and you have to practice the Dhamma. Sunata Dhahareta Charata. And you are fortunate enough to have monks who come here every week, every week, and you've been doing that for the last 100 years. How fortunate you are. So all the Bhantes who come here, they'll be teaching you how you can understand the reality of nature. And once you grasp that concept, you begin to realize that happiness is not in the things out there. And then that realization helps you to give up the things that you're attached to. So that is the answer. If someone's trying to ask a question, but they have unmute themselves.
Can you unmute this so that they can ask the question? Some are struggling to type it. You can't unmute. Let's respond with continuing. It's a question by the way. Yes, any questions from the audience here? Yes, Manuel.
Yes. So that again? Yes. Last forever. Yeah. Yeah. I'm very glad you asked that question, madam. It's a very good question to ask as well. See, if the Buddha's teaching was such that to be happy, you have to be constantly in meditation, I think that would defeat the purpose. The Buddha speaks of an anantariya samadhi, meaning a samadhi that is not conditioned, an unconditional samadhi. So the The happiness that Buddha wanted us to achieve was not a happiness that is only with us when we meditate. An arahant is always happy, whether they are in dhyanas, or whether they are doing a sermon, going on an alms round, right? Or maybe someone's killing someone in front of them. You can't take away an arahant's happiness. That is what we call an anantarika samadhi. That state of samadhi, anantarika samadhi. Anantarika samadhi. Yes. Anantarika samadhi. That samadhi, so samadhi is where the mind is at one with the Dhamma. So when you have that state of samadhi, it is not conditioned. It's an unconditional state of happiness. Now, of course, in your day-to-day life, you do use meditation to kind of switch off from the world for a little while and give yourself some relief, right? So it's peaceful. That's okay. But that is also, to some extent, relief from a vexation that is normally existing when you're just doing your day-to-day stuff. What we try to do with the Dhamma is to realize the anicca, dukkha and anatta, whereby you're happy no matter what goes on. Even if the roof were to collapse, right, and say everyone in here perishes, and you are the one that was left remaining, but you were there to observe it, you could be okay with that. That's not to say that you're not going to do anything about it. Of course you would. You try and save lives if you can. You try and maybe call the fire brigade and do whatever you can to help and save people. But your peace of mind is undisturbed. That state of samadhi has to come through realization of the Dhamma. So that is the ultimate state that we're all striving for. And little by little, as we continue with our practice, that's the state that we can all achieve. But you're not forbidden, of course, from experiencing the bliss of meditation when you get the chance to do so. That is perfectly fine as well.
Time is catching up. I ask one last question. Yes, for this question of letting go. Now, see, as lay people, we need to possess things. We need a house and so. That is at a material level. But what if we can let go while still possessing? We let go of all that at the mental level.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I want to do.
Right. That's what I meant by letting go.
Keep all your material possessions with you. Mentally, let go. And that can happen, sir, once you realize that none of them have intrinsically any happiness within them.
Happiness is all within you and happiness.
Right on.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhante. So we will see to an excellent. Okay. So.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. Okay. So when you're eating your Christmas cake, you will know that the first piece of cake is always going to be tasting better than the second piece of cake. So now I think you're convinced that happiness is not in the cake. Yeah. Otherwise, more cake should make you happier, but it doesn't, and you understand that. As you eat your cake, what I would like you to reflect on is ask yourself the question, where is this deliciousness coming from? Try and find the source of it. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Is it in the cake? Or is it a mental fabrication? It's a memory. Yeah. So there's water dropping on the lap. Normally, what people think is that deliciousness is in the cake. So therefore, they try and eat as much cake as they possibly can. That's why people travel the world. They go, to different restaurants and try to eat different types of food, expecting the food to make them happy. But they only do that because they think that happiness comes from the food. Now, once you realize that happiness is not in the food, by happiness I mean deliciousness. Happiness can mean beauty, happiness can mean melodiousness, happiness can mean deliciousness, right? Depends on which sense you're talking about. So if you contemplate on how I feel this deliciousness, then you realize that it's not in the cake. Although you like Christmas cake, I'm sure there are others who don't like Christmas cake. Doesn't that convince us that deliciousness is not in the cake? If it was in the cake, then everyone should find it delicious, right? So then we are convinced that the deliciousness is not in the cake, but we experience it, and that is because we have an expectation that it is there. And so when we eat it, that expectation is being, that's a vexation. That vexation is being relieved. And that is what you experience as pleasure.
Thank you. So before we wrap up, just one announcement to make. Thank you. Next week, that is on the 23rd of Saturday, we have a guided meditation session which will be conducted by Venerable Thero. So it will be on Zoom. It's a Zoom session, guided meditation by Venerable Thero. And now to end the session, and I ask once again, Venerable Battaramulle Amadassana Thero to do the Anumodana, because we did some meditation, we observed Panchasila, and we listened to a very interesting discussion by the Bhante, and participated in the discussion. So the merit accrued from all this, let us transfer to the departed as well as the parents.
So then before we conclude, let us take a moment to transfer the merits that we have all applied to all those who are deserving of it. First and foremost, let us remind ourselves how incredibly fortunate we are to be in receipt of the Lord Buddha's teaching, and with immense gratitude towards the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, upasakas and upasikas, who have since time immemorial protected and preserved the sublime teachings of the Buddha, and passed it down to the generations of the noble lineage in the form of its Tripitaka, which is thankfully available to us today to study, understand, and comprehend the Dhamma. Let us transfer these merits to them. Let us also transfer these merits to all members of the Mahasangha present throughout the world, including the chief preachers of all the chapters who dedicated their lives to the noble path and have committed themselves towards the betterment of all sentient beings. Let us also transfer these merits to all members, to the monks and nuns residing in your local temples and nunneries who have always been by your side through thick and thin, come rain or shine. Let us also transfer this message to my teacher, Guru Swami Mahanse, as well as all the monks resident at the monastery and the Anagarika and Anagarika community attached to the monastery. Let us also transfer this message to those who make great efforts to disseminate the teachings of the Buddha, be that by translating these talks, sharing them out with others, or inviting others to join them. By the power of these merits, may they be healed of any physical and mental ailments and overcome the obstacles to their spiritual progress. May they abstain from unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer these merits to the friends of the monastery, who are devotees, those who make contributions towards the construction of the monastery, to those who provide the Mahasangha with shelter, alms, robes, and medicines, as well as those who contribute, pass on their know-how and continue to extend their wishes. May they all rejoice in these merits. Let us also transfer these merits to our mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, nephews, and nieces, our friends, our acquaintances, our teachers, our employers, and our employees, as well as those who would have helped us, supported us, and assisted us in this long journey of samsara. May they all rejoice in these merits. By the power of these merits, may they be healed of any physical and mental ailments and overcome the obstacles to their spiritual progress. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu. Let us also take a moment to transfer these merits to the devas and brahmas, spirits and demons, primarily the Sakadeva, as well as all the numerous gods and deities who have committed themselves to fulfilling and preserving the Sammadasana. Let us take a moment to transfer these merits to our guardian deities who keep a watchful eye on us and keep us out of harm's way. By the power of these merits, may they prosper in divine power and wisdom. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let us also transfer this grace to those who have passed away in our name, our loved ones, those who have predeceased us, our forefathers and our ancestors, reminding ourselves that it is in their blood, sweat, and tears today we are able to enjoy the comforts that we do and practice the Dhamma in peaceful bliss. May they all rejoice in these days. Let us also transfer these grace to those who sacrifice their lives to protect the peace and harmony of our nation. This includes the members of the armed forces as well as the police force, as well as those who have lost their lives in the war, be they friend or foe. May they all rejoice in these merits. Let us also transfer this message to those who have lost their lives in natural disasters and calamities such as tsunamis and earthquakes, landslides, fires, blizzards, pandemics, and so on, reminding ourselves that in this infinite long journey of samsara, they will all have been mothers and fathers to us, brothers and sisters to us, friends and acquaintances to us, with infinite gratitude towards all of them, compassion and loving kindness. Let us transfer all the merits that we have all acquired to all of them. May they all rejoice in these nights, and if any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may they redeem themselves to be born in the blissful plane. May they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may by the power and blessings of all the merits we have acquired throughout the day, we would witness the advent of many hundreds of thousands of Arahants on this blessed land once again. And may you and I and everyone who has helped make this program a success become a Arahant Mahanse, an Arahant Mahanse, in this very life itself and in the era of the Gautama Supreme Bliss itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem be with you all. The members of the Mahasangha will transfer the blessings to you.
So in ending this talk and this meeting, on behalf of the servants of the Buddha, let me thank once again Venerable Battaramulle Amadassana Thero for coming all the way from India and delivering this talk, a very useful talk for all of us, as well as a Buddhist in the Panchasila, and taking us through a very novel, very useful, some guided meditation, and also doing the unwoven. Thank you very much, Bhante, for all your words. And I'd also like to thank Nadisha, our secretary, for reading the minutes, and all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presence here today and your participation, which includes all of you who have linked us and joined us on this Zoom platform. Thank you very much. We will meet again next Saturday for a guided session of meditation to be conducted by Venerable Helen Watte Dhammarakkhita Thero. This meeting is now closed. Thank you.